Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host Bill Stierle. And Bill, I tell you, in these weeks, in the run up to the election, these few weeks that are left, we're now at the point where there's not months left, there's just weeks left.
Yes.
There seems to be so much disinformation flying around. The volume of disinformation is getting higher and higher. And there's so many things to talk about around this and try to see how truth is getting purchased. But the first one that's just so shocking, and it's in the news as we're recording this, is that the state of California has discovered that the California GOP, the California Republican Party, has set up and installed their own voter unofficial ballot drop boxes, their own ballot drop boxes that if you look, and I've got a link in the blog post to one of the stories, but if you look at the images, it's a pretty, official looking drop box. If you didn't know what an official state of California drop box for ballots looked like, you might think, hey, this looks safe and secure. I'll put my Dropbox there. But the California Republican Party has taken upon themselves to put up these unofficial drop boxes at locations they deem safe, like churches and, other locations. And they're collecting illegally people's ballots. And the state attorney general said these are unauthorized, they're unlawful, and ordered the Republican Party to remove them. And thus far, the California Republican Party has refused. They're not willing to remove the unofficial drop boxes. And to me, there's a lot of details about this that we don't need to really sort of discuss and debate. But to me, the scary part of how this is purchasing truth is here you have the president of the United States who's been really sowing so much doubt and skepticism around the ballots, saying that if he loses, there was fraud in the system, the mail-in ballots are a disaster, and people should vote in person, right? And here, the Republican Party knows, and even the president really knows, because it's been proven time and time again that mail-in voting is safe. But here, the Republican Party is trying to prove that there's a problem with, ballots by tampering with them.
This is really very difficult. There's a lot to unpack in this. In a live conversation, Tom, I wouldn't have let you talk as much to set it up. In other words, if I'm going to use empathy and compassion right away, but for our listeners, we needed to give them time to slow down. And you giving us a full kind of like, Bill, here's some construct, here's some stuff, the foundation to stand on, is it helps us with the feeling of shock as we're trying to get our need for understanding or clarity about what did they do? Because a lot of times our body's feeling doubtful about the need for truth not being met, and we're fighting that. I know when you initially told me the story, I was going like, what? Doubt, skepticism showed up in my body, which actually takes my logical brain offline a little bit and say, what is the real impact of this? Is there any, all my problem solving brain goes and says, uh isn't there somebody that's going to arrest these people for doing this unlawful thing? And it's, it's exasperating. And another thing in our saturated information society, that you can get one event that takes place and then you can make it global. The president did that actually during the debate. He said, there's this thing that happened in Pennsylvania. There's this thing that happened over here in this creek about ballots, and they happen to be Trump's ballots. It's, he's sowing the feeling of doubt and skepticism to meet his own need for support, his own need to, stay connected in the position of being reelected. I mean, I want to stay in the position. I don't want to go anywhere. This is a great job. I get all of these different things that I get being the president. I'll do this job for 4 years. It's not, all I got to do is tweet every night and watch the bugs, scurry under my feet, you know, and it's very unsettling, because when the need for truth and trust are run over, then people start having two things that happen. They don't go fully to the medical system. They don't extend trust to the post office. They don't really trust the government fully anymore, as if that hasn't been chiseled away a bunch. Law enforcement gets to have doubt and skepticism about it. So that's the need for militias and people to have their own guns. And it's like it's sowing um, a narrative that's not a stable narrative. Um, and the need for stability, we get scared, we get nervous, we get anxious. And you and I were talking about that a little bit before we got on. Nervous and anxious for the next 3 weeks. The need for stability not being met, the need for trust not being met, certainty. We really don't have much certainty about how peaceful or violent it's going to be. What the transition is going to be like. We used to be able to, call votes and get a sense of the idea within 24, 48 hours after the election. But once you put doubt and skepticism into the system, what happens is, well, we got to make sure we're counting every votes. Well, that's what we did last time. Count everybody votes. And if you're getting it within the margin of error, if you're getting into the space of this state is going for, because of early voting, it's going to be really difficult, because now we have to wait for all of the precincts to come in, but there's not enough people in that area. So I'm ranting a little bit here, because you can see how confusing it gets down the mental rabbit hole of when doubt and skepticism gets introduced with the information piece.
Well, and here comes, as we set up the top, disinformation, right? I mean, the
Right.
the California Republican Party is trying to say, hey, these ballot drop boxes are very safe. And, it's no different than you handing your ballot to somebody that you trust to take it in, a friend. And isn't it more safe to put it in to our Dropbox than to hand it to a stranger that you don't know? And I mean, I thought that was such a false equivalence, because nobody's going to really give their ballot to a stranger they don't know and trust to take it in for them. And I don't know, but to me, again, it's just it is, you
It's
know,
also, yeah, the validation of what Trump has said. I'm going to be, this is my party. I'm going to be loyal. This is my identity. This is my guy. I'm going to support him. He is telling me this one thing. I am following this thing. It is I'm going to believe it to be true. Very
Well,
unsettling, because truth can be easily purchased once you know what somebody's bias is. If you have their bias and their belief structure, if you know what it is, all you got to do is just tap it a couple times and their brain is right there with you. It's like, oh, you know, if I would have done this, my wife wouldn't have left. If I would have done this, my husband would just be nicer to my kids. I must be the person that's the problem. We tell ourselves all kinds of disinformation to create doubt and skepticism inside ourselves just to validate a bad thing. We'll make up an entire story against that. We will. It's really hard.
oh, and well, and this is not the only disinformation running around right now in the
Right.
final weeks. Then, although this is a shocking one, there's also you've got how you know I don't know why this is happening now, because I think sometimes the current administration forgets that Hillary Clinton isn't running for office again,
Yes.
but that Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, is now set to release a lot of Hillary's emails.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so why? I mean, I just don't understand what that's doing except being a distraction again, or trying to throw more, again, disinformation out there, because the government did report, pretty recently, an exhaustive study that they found that she did not intentionally disclose classified information. And really, that was the end of it. But they're saying, well, no, we don't want that to be the end of it. We'd like people to still be unhappy with Hillary, so we're going to release her emails.
The need for trust in public officials is where the damage is. That's where the damage is. I'm not you're don't trust these Democrats. I'm trying to get them all in the same bucket. And if I get and Hillary is the biggest bucket I can use. It's the only one I got. They can't go back to Bill, because there's not enough traction there. They've got to go to here's where this person Hillary was and what she said and did in order you know, to make her life wonderful by using emails in the way she did. Why? It was easy to do her emails at home and she didn't, do the things that needed to be done to be compliant. And by the way, it doesn't really matter a negative story. So much time somebody throws a bunch of mud on you, you're trying so hard to clean the mud off, and it's really hard because the mud is already stuck to you. And the person says, yeah, there's mud there. You know what? You still haven't got that mud off of there. There's mud on that shirt. Look at the mud on the shirt. You're going like, I washed it. The mud's off the shirt. I thought I cleared this up. No, no, we saw you when the mud was on the shirt. And that's the thing that's unsettling is that um there's got to be a perspective that is put on these things, because otherwise people just stop trusting and stop leaning on truth the way they're doing it, and they do things like take justice into their own hands because they can't trust the government, they can't trust law enforcement, they can't trust the government, so they say, well, I'm a militia group and I believe this one thing, and 20 or 30 of my other friends do believe the same thing. Well, our truth is good enough and our justice is good enough because the truth and the justice isn't working because I have the level of disinformation to take place. The need for truth, those are the buttons that get pushed, and the doubt and skepticism shows up, and they feel helpless and powerless about dealing with their own emotions. They don't know how to process their own emotions and stuff. So that makes it really hard.
Well, and we saw that show up in the last week as well, with the attempted, the conspiracy and attempted kidnapping of Michigan Governor Whitmer. And
Yeah.
that's another one that's very concerning. And the incident itself is shocking, and
Right.
there are so many things around it that are shocking. I mean, I'm very happy that obviously the FBI was all over this, knew it was happening, they had an informant, and they were able to stop it before anybody got hurt. that's
Right.
that's the most important thing there. But then to see how the president talked about Governor Whitmer and the whole situation, and then also the way I'm seeing people that are in alignment with Trump on social media trying to say that, you know, several of the people involved, of like the 13 people that were arrested or whatever, were actually Biden supporters and not Trump supporters. I mean, just all of the disinformation going around that is pretty scary. Um,
Yeah, it's I felt confused about. See them the and I felt confused about this situation. Is this person really responsible for this? Well, I heard this other counter thing, and it validates my current belief bias in place. So how, and doing the work is where the, kind of like the magic is that they're feeling, those militia are feeling helpless about truth and trust because they're not getting the truth and the trust from their guy. You know, the the movement back towards the center, like, hey, you can run with your party and stay out there, but you better pivot back to do the center to run the rest of the country. And there is no ever pivoting back from not just the Trump narrative, but the Republican narrative has been pulled so much over to the other side, away from tolerance, away from acceptance, away from having a civil discussion about a different idea than I have than the other person has. So, how do we approach that in an empathetic and compassionate way? Because the person's in so much pain because they've been worked up, and they allowed themselves to get worked up and say, wait a minute, that person's just saying that because it's a political thing. Nope. It's, wait a minute, I better do something. I'm 17 years old and I have my gun and I'm going to go to Wisconsin because those police officers need my help. It's like, and the mom, I'll be glad to drive you up there to do that. It's like, this is what the validation of what Trump is saying when it sticks and it hits the person's mind, and they're going like, this one's outside your training, approval, you know, narrative. This is outside of what you should be doing in a civil society, not carrying your rifle up to, Wisconsin to do that. Very, very, very unsettling. So the disinformation, um, is very difficult because you start have to you have to fight. Your brain has to fight all these different micro you know um, moments of information. And you think you're promoting truth, but not as much. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And
So think about the attack here. Attack is too strong a word. Think about the counter information that has been put in the medical field. Trust us, don't trust us. Well, which one are we going to do? Trust you or don't trust you? Trust yourself. No, that's a bias. You trust what you can count. Well, they might be measuring the wrong thing. Again, I just introduced doubt and skepticism again. Do you see how quickly I did that? It's like, wait a minute, but they're measuring the wrong thing. Yeah, but they're not counting this thing that happened way over here in this corner. You're right. They're not counting it because it's not statistically relevant. It might have worked over there for that one thing because that person had different genetics than this person did. But most of the time, people die from
well,
this.
there's a lot of that going on. You're right. I mean, take the president now back out on the campaign trail. His doctor says it's okay for him to do it. Apparently, he's had a negative COVID test now, and he's then he put out this video saying he was cured, that there is a cure for this now. Now
Right.
that's a dangerous word that was used to purchase some truth. And I mean, so many problems with that because nobody else in the United States can get the level of care the president did with an experimental therapeutic drug, which is very hopeful. I'll give you that. There's hope for the future of treating this virus, but nobody else can get that treatment. And there's a lot of doubt and skepticism being thrown around the number of people that have died. And of course, there's, I think, a lot of conservatives tend to say, oh, the number is really inflated. There really haven't been 200,000 people died, because a lot of people died of heart attacks or they died of diabetes or something else, and it wasn't really COVID. Well, there's actually been a lot more in studies that have come out just in the last week that suggest the number's probably actually even higher than they've reported. It's more like 250,000 or more. So because of some other, not getting into the details of the data right now, but there's definitely some evidence on the other side. But here's the thing that's pretty scary, Bill, that I think no matter whether you trust the death numbers as being from COVID or not, or you trust the numbers on the number of people that have been tested to be infected, because I think there's a lot of, um, I think there's cause to have doubt and skepticism as to whether
Yeah.
all those
Oh,
numbers are
yeah.
accurate.
There's nothing wrong with the emotion of doubt and skepticism. It's when it's being used to purchase truth away from what we need to focus on, which is the primary target of consideration and health for other fellow Americans. I mean, the number is 1 in 16, Americans are going to pass from this thing, or have passed from this thing, or have, the number is like way too darn big to go like, when is it's going to get 1 in 1? I mean, it's like, like what are we going for here? Is that we're going to see how many people have this experience of COVID and the long-term health problems that it causes. That's not a good thing,
Well,
so
it's not. And what we're seeing now happening as we are in the last few weeks before the election is that the number of cases in the United States, the daily cases are identified, are going up. But again, you can say you you can doubt that number, you can challenge that number, but here's the one thing that is very, very hard to challenge, that I
mhm,
was reading about just yesterday, is that the number of people being admitted to the hospital again is going up
yeah,
very, very fast. That is not something that I think is easy to doubt. I mean, the reality is the stress on the medical system, the number of people in the hospital, that's not fuzzy math. That's a reality. The hospitals are filling up with people that need critical care in order to survive this virus. So it's pretty hard to fudge those numbers. You either have people in the hospital or you don't.
or you don't. Yeah, there's 30,000 people right now in hospitals throughout the nation that have COVID at this moment. And that's close to capacity, by the way,
Yeah, they're
because we're not
especially in
built. We're
more
not built for
where they're
crisis.
seeing it going up a lot is a lot of the more rural, middle America states
Oh,
that
for
don't
sure.
have the hospital capacity, don't have as many ICU beds,
Right.
and there's getting to be a serious problem. And I'm just waiting for it to be Florida again, Bill, because Florida governor, I mean, this is an interesting thing. The Florida governor opened up the entire state. He said, there are no more restrictions. You don't have to wear masks anywhere. Restaurants can be fully open, have people indoors. And here's the one that really kind of surprised me. He said, and to our 3 NFL teams, go ahead and fill your stadiums, sell all those tickets to your football games. go ahead, no reason not to do that. But the NFL is putting a different standard forth and saying, well, no, we're not ready to do that. We're not going to be filling our stadiums to capacity. And the NFL, controls its own body of teams, and it's not just a state thing. But I am waiting for
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
waiting for the Florida numbers to again go up.
Yeah, there's a wonderful data thing, and I put a link in the chat box for you, Tom.
I got it. Yeah.
The researcher Steve McConnell has done a
Not to be
wonderful job of
confused with Mitch McConnell. I just want to make sure we're
right
clear for our
there.
listeners. This is a different person.
There you go. That's right, Steve. Steve, the researcher, he does state data from state to state. There's if you want to download the state, he has a nice simple scale from 1 to 10. 1 means the state is in severe, is having a severe infection problem and death problem. If it has a 1, and if it has a and the scales from 1 to 10, if it has a 10, it's off. There's only 1 state that has a 9, and there are 16 states that have a 1 that are in the worst case based on the data. And there's you have to click around to the data things to find your state. And California on a scale of 1 to 10 is a 5. Florida is a 3. And they just kind of said, well, we're going to open back up, but Arkansas is a 1. And then a lot of the red states now, Idaho, Kansas, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, they're all pulling, really terrible numbers. North Dakota, North Carolina is a 2. They're pulling really terrible numbers. Tennessee's a 1. Like I said, South Dakota.
Is the lower number
Utah.
worse in this scenario?
The lower numbers worse. Yeah, they're all 1s. They're all top of the list. They are number 1. They are in the list. Whereas if Maine is the lowest with a 9. And I think there's only one other 8 in the list too. I think, or maybe it's 7. New York has a 7, and that's the next closest. Jersey's 6, a few 6s, but not much, and a few more 5s. But most of the time, most of the folks are 1, 2, and 3. And the virus, we're not getting out of this, and until there's 500,000 people dead by March or April of next year.
If it takes that long, honestly.
Well, the prediction right now is February for close to 400,000 in February, by February, and then that's going to, at least by my simple estimation, will be at 500,000 by May, June, easy. So and the mask wearing works, and I'm repeating it because a scientist repeated. It's like, hey, the numbers go down, and California went from a 1 worse to a 5. We're in the middle now, so some parts of the state are going like, well, let's see if we can at least relax a little bit, and they're still, people are relaxing a little bit, so getting out a little bit. So it's a big thing. Well, the place to land here, Tom, with our truth and information, disinformation, and that's and then people look at the researcher that does the work. Look at the scientist that spent 20 years studying that, and could they be wrong, or could they have a small variation that might be not true because they discovered something new, because that's the way science works, is you have a truth, and this is what we know at this time, and then we've got to then say, well, this is what we know at this time. Well, what we knew at this one time is Christopher Columbus was this Italian person that came across the ocean and discovered, America, where it was named after a different guy. And, it's like, it's still a head shaker what people believe is true. And then, well, Christopher Columbus was not a nice guy. And now we're going to change his day to Indigenous Cultures Day. I mean, we're making a change because you discover things. And that's what the adult mind does, is say, change can take place. We can do a change thing.
Well, did you see though how the president was doubling down on Columbus yesterday at his rally? He's been like, he's creating this culture of not wanting to rewrite our history. And he was elevating Christopher Columbus in many ways, trying to reinforce the,
Belief.
the original political beliefs and myths about him, and instead of accepting that, hey, we can learn more about somebody and that our culture changes, and we can realize, maybe he wasn't a great guy, and we can rewrite our history and change it to Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yeah.
He's again looking for, he's trying to sort of recreate his 1950s version of America that he wants it to be.
That's right. Yeah, it's very unsettling when a belief bias gets put into place that way. Very, very unsettling. So, well, more to come on this, Tom. I really appreciate us going down this rabbit hole. We need to take a look at information, and we do need to double check things, as we put things up, and it can make a big difference. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your help, Bill. I appreciate it. And I'm going to have the links to that Steve McConnell site about, spin-free data on COVID in the blog post, as well as the CNN article about the ballot drop boxes in California, if anybody wants to check out more about that.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.